We are live with Chevy Cool Lady. Welcome. Come on in. We're going to discuss two cases. Right now, we're going to go over the Mica Francis case, Justice for Mica, and we're also going to discuss Sebastian Rogers. Um, it's been 6 months, a little bit over since we first got wind of Mica and the tragic story that has unfolded ever since. It seems like nonstop information. So I thought we'd just kind of backtrack and go over some information. I've kept a lot of notes and we'll go over this. Please feel free to join in the chat. I will address any kind of questions or information that you're bringing forth. You are appreciated. Welcome to Chevy Cool Lady. I'm Chevy. We are discussing true crime. True crime. We are bringing awareness. We are not making any kind of accusations. Everything is speculatory and basically my opinion. So please join me. You are welcome. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We want to bring awareness to as many ears as we can. So Mica Francis brought the story of abuse and its tragic end to the forefront. And with it, I have dug deeper and discovered a bottomless pit of abuse and scandal. And it brings me down and it breaks my heart. But I know that knowledge is power. My goal is to empower the abused to say enough. But first, put yourself in a safe place. That's all I ever say. Just make sure you're safe. But get out of your abusive situation. Let me grant you what I have learned in the quest for freedom. We're going to go over basically the timeline. I just wanted to say that in the beginning because what we saw was uh, a story that was tragic with Mica. She had just turned 30 years old, wife of a local pastor here in Myrtle Beach, where I'm reporting from. She really was everything. She was a beautiful person, beautiful physically, as well as she just seemed so sweet and so loving. I didn't know her personally, but after watching so many videos and reading so much and hearing her friends talk about her, you know, Mica Mica's loss was a loss to us all. Basically, the story's been twisted and skewed in so many different ways that I thought we'd just take a little bit of time and go over the events that happened in with Mica. So come on in, grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's talk about what's going on. Uh, we've learned so much about her. Come on in, come on in. Hard to know even where to start. Um, but we're going to talk about some things that and break down basically some of the situations that were going on that we saw. We saw basically that Mica was stripped of her identity in her abusive situation. Um, this is what you would call coercive persuasion. Um, it's there's basically three steps that happen in coercion. The breaking of people, which you could classify as the unfreezing. Whatever personality that you walk into a relationship or even into a group like a church setting, it could be a business group. There's lots of ways coercion can come about in a situation. And the first aspect of it is the stripping of identity, or the unfreezing or breaking of the personality. After that, a change is prescribed. Generally, it's some type of program. For example, Micah talked about, when she gave her little video about being the bride of Christ, and she talked about, you know, sometimes, you're basically being told that you're not enough, even though you know that you're giving your all. You're told that you're not a good wife or a good mother, good whatever. And it breaks you down as a person because you've tried so hard to be good at it. Tried to be perfect even. And then to be told by an abusive person that's not good enough, that you need to change, you need to become like JP would tell her to be a godly wife, because I guess he was such a godly husband, the coercive control. You're never going to be good enough for someone using coercive control. I can tell you that right now. But to break people down, basically is an unfreezing of the personality. It's basically in a group setting would cause the type of thing would cause for like confessions. Confess all the things you've done wrong to me. Confess, all your faults and inadequacies. And once the coercive controller has that information, they will use it against you. We learned about John Paul's little groups he had that were, I guess, under the guise of some kind of marriage counseling or counseling in general, where he'd get people to break down, to confess their faults. We saw when he came up with the letter. Somebody remember when he was trying to get information, even willing to pay allegedly for information on people who were speaking out against him. And he used people's past sins that he knew about because he was a pastor and in a counseling position. He tried to use that information to dig up more dirt on people. That's evil. That is evil. To take things that are said and then twist them, especially in a public manner. We saw where one heartbreaking video that I remember about Micah was the one that came out pretty recently, where he was in bed and she had just had her operation, a day or two before that. And she was in the bedroom and she was curious about some things. And, it seemed to me she was hyped up, and kind of rambling and getting facts mixed up and asking him. And, and all he could do was pull out his phone and record it and then even pretend to cry. And we saw, anybody that would do that and then publicize it later on, we know that was a very controlling situation she was in. His solution for her was basically to get in line behind him and do what he said, whether it was scriptural or not scriptural. He didn't want any pushback on anything. And because of that, she deteriorated in her father's word. And it was a spiral that stole her identity. When there is coercive control in a situation, it's an unhealthy situation, and it's one that will destroy the identity of a person. There are certain types of tactics that are used by controlling people. Isolation, and then isolating people from their family, friends, people that they've known, even morals and religious backgrounds and that type of thing, to snatch someone out of what they identify with and the people they identify to leaves them in a state of isolation. Now, coercive control then will turn that isolation into a need that uh, allows the controller to then produce solutions for that person. Well, just look to me. I'm the one that has all the answers. I'll give you the answers. You need medication. Now I'm a psychiatrist. Now I'm a doctor, and I can tell you what's wrong and what you need. And we saw that in that case where he actually prescribed possibly things that were, supposedly prescribed to him for her, because now he knows what she needs, and made many, 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 how many statements about she needed lithium, 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 and it's really crazy, to think that a heavy metal is going to really do something good in a human body. I'm not saying it never has helped anybody, but I'm saying it's not something to be taken lightly either, and it's not something to be passed out like candy. And that's how he was making it seem, breaking people down and then coming up with the solution, because that creates a more of a psychological need. It empowers the controller, and it becomes just a situation where someone's losing their identity and they're being isolated. They are often then taken out of the environment that they're in, made to move sometimes far away from where they grew up, or away from the family. The family's then looked at as negative influences because they're reaching out, trying to grab hold of the person that they used to know. Then all of a sudden, because they're given the controller the backlash, then they're treated as if the family or friends are negative influence and referred to as such. We saw that in Mica's case. I'm on the phone. Yep, that's great. My daughter's walking in, so that's awesome. Put a sheet over her head. Okay, she's 33. It wasn't that thrilling. I love my family. I tell you, they're crazy. But anyway, okay, so gaslighting, that's part of the situation that we saw. Gaslighting. Gaslighting not just by John Paul, but by the whole group of, the members of the church. It seemed like we're falling right into the gaslight. Um, Out of environment and gets confirmation of real life from outside group. Okay, so becoming, especially in church settings, it can happen so easily where you're made to feel like you're part of this group, and this group is so great, and this one particular church seems to have all the answers, and not only that, but they're doing all this stuff together as a little clique. When they go out to eat, everybody all sits together, and then they go maybe to another church and everybody sits all together. Wherever they go is a little group, a little clique. Maybe they have even special little language, little phrases that they might use, and that type of thing. Because they're the people of understanding. You see, that's how it's structured, to make it seem like only this particular group has the truth, and anyone outside the truth doesn't have the truth. When we saw a letter from John Paul to the congregation, we see him speak in those kind of terms, where he is basically saying, the people are behind him, are in one category, then everybody else, well, they're letting the devil win, right? You leave the group, you leave the protection of the group, then all of a sudden now you're on the devil's side, because he himself is on God's side. But then you have to realize, at a particular point, he was, in my opinion, his own God, because he certainly wasn't following the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who sets apart his people in holiness. and righteousness, who calls for kindness and love. We didn't see the fruit of the Spirit in his life, and in my opinion, we still don't. We see a lot of game playing and coercive behavior and manipulation, and those things aren't of God. Those things are straight from the devil. By your fruit you are known. The control extends to make yourself doubt yourself and to doubt other people too. It can then escalate into criminal behavior, and we basically saw these things happen in Micah's life. We saw deception. We saw deception from the group. Remember when she had actually escaped for a time, and you know she was regaining her identity, regaining herself. You know, um, I'm kind of trying to remember the details exactly why John Paul wanted her to have her medicine. She reluctantly, it seemed like, agreed to meet uh, the so-called Reverend Randall of the Saints Delight. Um, that guy, I believe it was in Walmart shopping center. This is coming back to me now. She met with him supposedly to get her medicine, but in fact it was a staged and I'm in my opinion kidnapping, where she was then turned over to the state hospital. She was trapped and had to go to the hospital, not of her own will, and seemingly from other people's testimony, not because she needed it, but because this was a control tactic, a lot kind of a last ditch effort in JP's momentum to control Micah. And when she met with Randall in the am I saying his name Randall um, correctly? Uh, Reverend Randall. I get Wayne Randall and Randolph mixed up. So sometimes I think, why are their names so Reginald Wayne Miller, and then there's Reverend Randolph. Okay, I'm talking about Randolph. And anyway, he, in my opinion, betrayed Michael when he met with her in the Walmart parking lot, where she was apprehended and taken to the hospital against her will, where she was kept for, I believe, 3 days, during which time JP confiscated her property, the car that she said was in her name, the phone that she said was in her name, that had her private information, her laptop, that again belonged to her. He claimed her marital property, even though they were separated. Obviously, this was a big ruse. Had her sign papers releasing it while she was under anesthesia. To me, it was just a horrible. Or no, I'm sorry, that was different. So she wasn't under anesthesia, but she was confined in the mental hospital, and she wasn't allowed to make the decisions where she could protect herself at that particular point, and he took advantage of it. So when that happened, not only that was she betrayed by John Paul, but she was also betrayed by the elders of the church and people that she trusted, someone that John Paul said she looked to as a spiritual father. Whether she did or not, I don't know. I'm just saying this was what was said of him. And then he's going to turn around and treat her like that. Then later on, when at the funeral, when he was discussing her, was acting like, oh yeah, she was like my child. Well, is that how you treat your child? Really? I mean, I guess some people do, but that's certainly not the relationship that you're trying to portray. So Micah was not only isolated by her spouse, but also by her her people that were in her church that she looked up to, that she went on missionary trips with. Betrayed because of one person who wanted control. And that's what's so sad. it's so sad because that story has a tragic end. And that's why I make these videos, to bring awareness that it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody, and there's so many sets of circumstances that can arise that enable people who have bad intentions to take control of other people. It's something that, like, you have to have a certain mindset to even want to be that. You know what I'm saying? You have to have a certain type of personality that even would want to control somebody else. Because I feel like most people are like me. There's no way I would want to control somebody to have them love me. If they don't love me of their own will, then I don't want anything to do with them. That is kind of my attitude, and I think most people would feel that way. But some people, they can't stand, their egos won't even allow just a natural process to develop. Instead, they just have to be coercive and controlling in the situation, and that's what we saw in particular in Mica's situation. Now I'm going to kind of skip over to Sebastian. Sebastian Rogers is another case I'm working on to bring awareness to the situation. This is a young boy, 15 years old. Just a couple days ago was the memorial of his possible abduction, his disappearance. In any case, we don't know what happened. There's been so much uh, confusion and discord around this case also. But on just to give a timeline, on February 28th, 2024, Sebastian Rogers disappeared from his home. This is an ongoing information, and I do want to state that all opinions are mine. There are no accusations, just opinions based on both police reports and interviews, FBI and TBI releases as well. Okay, so these are my opinions on the case. So 8 months ago, a 15-year-old boy um, disappeared from Hendersonville, Tennessee. That's, I believe, like 20 miles, or anyway, just outside of northeast Nashville. What happened on February 28th? His initial disappearance, early February. I'm sorry, I'm saying 28th. It's February 26th. February 26th, 2024. It was a Monday morning while the rest of the town was getting ready for work and school. There was one person who was missing, and that's Sebastian Rogers. In the morning, a 911 call was received uh, concerning a missing child from Stafford Court neighborhood, where Katie and Chris Proudfoot lived with Sebastian. Sebastian went to West Beach High School. His mother was Katie, and his stepfather is Chris Proudfoot. You'll hear also about Seth, and Seth is Sebastian's biological father. So the mother, Katie, at this time when the 911 call went in, had left and was driving a baby blue SUV um, looking for Sebastian. No one was sure exactly what time he disappeared. He had been in the house by his mother's testimony at midnight. He went to bed a little earlier than that, but she saw him at midnight. Somehow, in the morning, he was gone. Nobody knows if he left of his own will and volition, if something happened to him, or if he was abducted. He was last known in his home He had left his phone in the kitchen and his shoes by the back door. According to his mother, all his shoes were accounted for, so that would make him barefoot. He was on the autistic spectrum and very sensitive, as many autistic children and people are. And for him to go outside without shoes, according to his father, Seth, was not something that happened. According to him, he had a story that Sebastian had stepped in an ant pile when he was a kid, and ever since then he wouldn't go outside without shoes. So he was out without his shoes. That's one big red flag right there. At first, they were hopeful of a return. The police came out along with the canine units, and now from I listened to the first 11 hours of the search, the 911 call from the dispatch, and there were some things that kind of struck my attention. There were footprints that there was a construction site behind his home. There were footprints that led to the pond by the construction site and stopped right there. The canine, this is as I understand it. If you've heard something different, please leave a note for me. This is what I'm understanding. The canines were called out, followed the footprint right to the pond, and then actually went into the pond. Later, the pond was, divers were called out to, uh, you know, search the pond. Nothing was found, and there were no further footprints, not on the other side. Uh, the police checked every tip that came in. They called in not just one, but I think there were three drone operators that came in. And one particular point that stood out in the 911 call, the drone operator said that he saw a man standing on the other side of the pond in the woods, just standing there. Couldn't make him out. Um, you hear him talking on the 911 call about a lone person standing near the pond. Then as he approaches it, turns out it's a mannequin, which is weird. Do y'all think that's weird? There was a mannequin in the woods. I think that's creepy. And I've heard a lot of times where people actually saw human bodies. This is not the case here, but they saw a human body and thought it was a mannequin. This is a twist where they actually saw a mannequin and thought it was a human. It's really weird. But anyway, it didn't turn out to be anything that had to do with Sebastian. They canvassed the area. They went to every home across the pond, across his house. They searched Sebastian's house multiple times. They searched the neighbor's house multiple times. They searched, I think they said a 5-mile radius around last known area. Um, One tip said that a neighbor had found him at some previous point under his car, so that added to the checklist for the police to search under vehicles as well, but still no sight of Sebastian. There were sightings in the area, supposed sightings and tips saying that he was seen in Hendersonville downtown, in Gallatin, on Long Hollow Road. All these places are about 12 miles apart. You know, not impossible for a 15-year-old to walk to, but a 15-year-old with autism and no shoes, still they checked it out, but no luck. The sightings were not Sebastian. They got a lead to go to White House High School, which was about 10 miles away. Sebastian had some kind of ties to that school. They went there, no Sebastian. Um, they went to a place called Strike and Spare, I guess a little bowling place, and he had been there 2 days prior with Katie. They were said to have had a really good time, so they went back there thinking maybe, he returned. Nope, no luck. The case escalated from an endangered child report to an amber alert, meaning that they've also included possible abduction in the search. Again, this is possible abduction. We don't know what's happened. The Okay, so then we start seeing things being discovered in the families. There was a risk factor, um, of course, because of the autism and the age. He's still a child. We did learn that 58% of children abducted are abducted by non-custodial parents. So let's look into Seth, the non-custodial parent. He wasn't, I don't believe, non-custodial at that time, but they were going through a custody battle. Katie and Seth were going through a custody battle at that time. Okay. So, it just added more fuel to the fire, more things to research. Volunteer search groups comb the area of Hendersonville. Sumner County, where this is located, had a group called the Fire Buffs, and they provided food for the searchers. Nicole Federchuk, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, is a spokesperson for that group as well. They looked at all the surveillance systems that they could find, both residential and business, and had no sightings of Sebastian whatsoever. WKRN, local news, reported that they saw red flags. The family had not contacted the media concerning the search, and that's very unusual. I mean, what would you do if you had a child who was missing? I don't care how private a person you are, putting the word out that your child is missing is going to come above everything else. 3 days into the search, the parents had made no media appearance, and this raised eyebrows. The speculation was raised about Seth as well. In fact, Chris Proudfoot, the stepdad, even put out a no harassment notice. Please don't harass us. Yeah, I get it, but at the same time, no, I don't. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so News Nation got involved about this time. Hi, Spy. We're talking about Sebastian right now and spreading awareness for Sebastian. So I'm going over the timeline. Basically, 3 days into the search, the parents still hadn't made a media what do you call it? Announcement or whatever, a cry out for their son. By March 2nd, he had disappeared on February 26th. By March 2nd, the business owners had posted a $3,000 reward. By the second week, the search scaled down. This was not due to anything other than it had not been fruitful, and it's quite costly to keep the amount of search and rescue teams out there. It costs a tremendous amount of money, and they decided to scale back and turn the investigation more towards the investigative aspect. So funding is the issue to carry out a full search, and at one time in particular, over 200 officials were out on site. Now, the ground search turned up nothing, and by all accounts, it was intensive. They had volunteer teams, dog teams, horses, drones, and rescue agencies. The ground effort got scaled back, and this is about the time that a lot of attention falls away from the particular individual. In this case, it's Sebastian. And that's what we don't want to happen. It's been 8 months, still no word. Nobody knows what happened to him. And there's been a lot of trouble and a lot of riotous behavior, I would say. And I'll get to that too. But the police at this particular time, 2 weeks he's missing, scaled back the investigation, transitioned into more an investigative aspect. They also instructed the residents of the town to check their property and see if there might be any place that a teenager would be attracted to, where they might be hiding on their property, um, and basically, they didn't know what else to do. So from March 4th to the 7th, I'm not sure that anything much happened, or certainly nothing new, but on the 7th, the landfill was searched. They determined he was not there. News Nation then interviewed Seth. Seth is the biological father of 15-year-old Sebastian, who's missing now 2 weeks. Elizabeth Vargas reported that Seth appeared confused and frustrated. At this particular time, they checked for his shoes. Apparently, Katie said all his shoes were accounted for. The Nintendo was checked for any online people he might have been talking to who could have done such a thing. His phone, which was left at the house along with his shoes, still in the kitchen, was also checked. And all these things led to nothing. Like I said, for Sebastian being autistic was not at all likely to be in his bare feet outside at any time, according to family members. A major concern, of course, Seth said in this interview, was that the Proudfoots had not spoken to Seth in 2 weeks. Okay, I can understand to a point, them not wanting to be so-called harassed by reporters or be in the public limelight, although that's what needed to happen. So I really don't understand that. But for them not to be in touch at all with the biological father, who was also living in the same area, is really, really a major point of concern. Basically, TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, according to radio station or TV station WKEN, quoted the Proudfoots as were quoted of the Proudfoots to be cooperating, but said there's a little bit of clues. Right. Thanks, Teenies. With the way Seth has acted, I can now see why they didn't want to talk. The whole situation has a lot of confusion and bad feelings. And, I'm trying to be as objective as I can because I have no idea what happened to Sebastian. And I just want to bring awareness to people. And there has been a lot of controversy. Now, the family, let's see. Okay, so the family at this time, uh, were, you know, kind of isolated in a way. Foul play, according to TBI, was not ruled out and yet had yet to be proven. So there's just no clues. What happened? Then TBI did a question and answer press release. They mentioned what areas were searched within the first several days. It turned out by the time that this question and answer press release came, over 2,000 miles had been searched. Law enforcement canvassed the neighborhood. It was canvassed aerially by helicopter, drone, and winged plane. Sebastian home residence, yard and house, and vehicles were searched multiple times. The neighborhood was searched, the neighbors' houses searched. The family uh, re- reports uh, as, that he is autistic and drawn to water. So the pools were searched. Dive teams were called in. Ponds and caves were also searched. And no luck. One thing that was released that is kind of crazy is there was a surveillance camera in the Proudfoots neighborhood on the night of the disappearance in the dark, and this is very dark, pitch black area. You could see what's reported to be two people with flashlights. They were a little bit of a distance apart. Then you see one kind of walking towards the other one. Mystery, big mystery. What is that about? That's all that I've gotten from that. And that, to me, kind of is the answer. Who had those flashlights? What was that about? I could be wrong, but we don't know what that was about as far as I know. If you've all seen that little video and have any insight into that, I'd love to hear about that. But anyway, we had actually two agencies or three agencies on this case at one particular time: TBI, FBI, and at the social or Secret Service was even out there. Um, Surveillance may have been evidential. We don't know. Okay, so let's see. On the 14th, okay, yeah, that the 14th is when that video came out by my notes, and that was across the common area behind the Proudfit house. It's crazy to watch it. So they searched for digital evidence in the gaming system, in the cells, and in the surveillance, both residential and businesses. The vehicles that the Proudfoot and Seth drive were all identified and had been in particular places that were identified. Um, Interviews had all been conducted by the police at this time, and the police to the residents in the neighborhoods were issued to look on their own personal properties. Now, at this particular time, a article came out, a lead dated March 22nd, and the lead was to to search a West Tennessee National Park. Seth went out there and continued the search, and from what I've seen, continued to pass out flyers. It was reported, I don't know if it's true or not, that at some point the Proudfoots were actually tearing down flyers. At least Chris was reported to have been doing that. Have you all heard about that? And what would the possible reasons for that be? So Seth was questioned why his search was so broad to go to West Tennessee. And he said, he was checking out every lead, that all he could think of was his child's gone, and in a report said that's all he can focus on. On the 23rd of March, the United Cajun Navy joined, per Seth's request, the Proudfoots. I always want to say Proud Feet, but that's just not right. The Proudfoots started public appearances at this time. They did a News Nation report, basically saying, finding Sebastian safe is their hope. There were inconsistent stories, accusations of abuse that started to fly at this particular time in both directions. So, back to the beginning. On Sunday, the 25th of February, Sebastian spent the day with Katie and a relative. They were told that, or we were told that they picked up a niece. Okay, that they had fun that day doing whatever activities, and the next thing you know, Sebastian was home. He did his chores and went to bed. I don't know what happened to the niece. And that's what I've been trying to find out. Was the niece picked up? Was she dropped off? I kind of missed that particular item. If you all know, please leave it in the comments. I'm just curious that on Sunday the 25th, the day before the disappearance, and there was a niece that was picked up by Katie and Sebastian. They spent the day. The next thing I read was that Katie said he was home, he did his chores, and went to bed. Now, Sebastian was missing in the morning. Supposedly, Katie had called Chris that evening. They talked on the phone at night while he was out of town working. Um, Supposedly, she was falling asleep. This story has changed a lot too. So one version says Chris was out of town working. Um, Chris offers, like I said, major discrepancies here uh, in the Proudfoot interview. So March 25th, Nancy Grace did an interview which was full of questions, then the interview was full of questionable accounts. Katie seemed emotionless. Chris looked into the camera and seemed to have inappropriate emotional responses. They avoided looking at each other. They This is compared to some other interviews that they did. One was with Chronicles of Olivia on March 18th. Um, it's hard to say how people should respond or shouldn't respond, or what type of emotions they have when they're put in these types of situations. Who's to say what's an appropriate response or what's an inappropriate response? So all that's just gauged by what we would consider normal or how we think we might act in a situation. You know, all I'm doing is just reporting what's been said, basically, without getting into any kind of accusations or anything like that. But this is what was said. Um, the events of the 25th seem suspicious, as stated by Katie. WMBS did an interview on the 5th of March. The news interview uh, showed Katie looking the part of the nervous mother, the inconsistencies and demeanor in the interviews, and odd behavior. Katie tells Olivia that she made breakfast the day of the disappearance, and she really made a point to say she made, I think it was spaghetti pancakes or something crazy like that, but she made a point to say she made breakfast. Some people wondered, does she not usually make breakfast, or was there maybe somebody else there who could have possibly made breakfast? I don't know what the point of making a big deal about making breakfast was. So she made a comment about making breakfast spaghetti pancakes, and she said this, and there was an interview with Duchess and her panel, who kind of made a point about that. Okay, so who called? Who was there? There was a call to pick up the niece. Um, but sometime, here's a question, between 9 p.m. and midnight, there's some other inconsistencies. This included details of being in Sebastian's room and hearing a thud about 10 o'clock. In one story, she said she yelled, "You're supposed to be asleep." Um, Nancy Grace, in an interview, said, asked about the same thing, and Katie said that she heard a thud around 10 and yelled, "Bubba, did you fall out of your bed?" but didn't go check on him. So there's just a few little details that were added in some of the interviews. This received some kind of backlash, and public opinion came in. On the 25th, on Crime Stories, Nancy Grace, uh, Katie said she asked if, same incident, asked if he was okay, and he responded that he was. Now, in the third Duchess interview, this is where some inconsistencies came in. Katie said she fell asleep about 10:30, and Sebastian had gone to bed about 9. Katie said she got up and went to bed at midnight. Now, Chris said basically at 9:43 he was on the phone with Katie, and she fell asleep on him. And he told her, this is where he said she needs to get up and wake up and put the dogs up around 12. This happened. So now we got the dogs getting put up involved. Um, on March 29th, Nancy Grace said, "Walk me through exactly what transpired on this night." Now Katie had this answer. "We usually talk at night." Uh, she said also that she was reading around midnight and talking on the phone. This was the first time she mentioned reading. She had to read a book that she had to finish, she said, and this apparently was for a business administration class. She said she put the dogs up, and that was probably the only consistent thing that was said in that interview. Some people referred this as being evasive and using evasive mannerisms at this time. The Nancy panel was interviewing them in this particular interview. Chris was in control, and in most of the interview, he fielded the questions, and he did a really good job at not really answering questions. Some would use the word evade. Uh, Katie wouldn't answer the questions but look to him. Um, when asked about how many shoes Sebastian had, she said she would not specify, but they were all accounted for. And that's kind of odd. Like, why can't you say how many shoes your son has? Does he have 3 pair? Does he have 6 pair? Does he have 1 pair? And they were gone. It just seemed weird that, why wouldn't you answer that question or say, oh no, he has 6 or 7 pairs or whatever, however many pairs that he has. But instead it was like, I'm not going to specify, but they're all in the house. It just seemed weird. There's not much to read into it other than it just seemed weird. Um, okay, so she was asked about the cars, or they were asked about the cars that they owned, and they said that they had 3. Um, she hers was specified, his was specified, but they said there was another truck and they didn't have release from the company. It was her company truck, and they couldn't tell them anything about it. They couldn't tell a make or model. Why would that matter? I don't know. Just kind of weird things, and who knows, right? I'm just going over some information. Now, with the Duchess on March 3rd, uh, I believe Chris said he was on the phone. He used weird times. He said it was either 9:43 or 9:46 p.m. was the time of the call to his wife. They were on the phone 3 hours and 37 minutes. Now, oh, okay. 3 hours and 37 minutes is the time to drive from St. Jude's in Memphis to Stafford Court, where they live. So he was working at St. Jude's in Memphis, supposedly out of town. Um, Again, there's been some discrepancies on this too, from what I've heard. But he supposedly was working at St. Jude's in Memphis, and that's 3 hours and 37 minutes from Stafford Court, where they live. They were asked where the cars were that night. Her car was in the driveway, his was in Memphis. The third car was in the garage, and they could not say because of her work. Katie works for Brinks Home Security as an installation technician. They were asked about the garage itself. Is there a remote or a code? They answered both, and Sebastian did know the code for the garage, but only Chris and Katie have the remotes. So Sebastian apparently has chromosomal disorder as well as ADHD. He takes medication regularly. I don't know if he takes his own medicine, if it's in his bathroom and he administers it himself, or if the parents are responsible, Katie in particular, in making sure he gets his medicine every day. But one thing generally spoken of in my research with autism is that being on a daily schedule is very, very important for the autistic child to stay in a routine. And he would certainly know this and want to keep to his routine. So, was his medicine still in the cabinet when he disappeared? I don't know. Do y'all know? Have you heard about that? If you have heard about it, was any of his medication missing? Let me know. Now, Chris would not divulge Sebastian's medication. Uh, why? I don't know. But he seemed like he was evasive about it. Now, just as kind of a backstory. In 2016, Chris was married. Uh, he's actually been married 4 times. He was accused by his ex-wife Nina of abusing her children. This is backed up by court documents and protective orders. There's been a series of incidents between Chris and Nina over the years concerning their daughter Faith. In 2017, they had a daughter. Uh, Faith was born. Chris was upset about having a child. In 2019, Chris and Nina broke up. Chris was stationed at that time in the Navy in San Diego, and at that time Nina went to her parents in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He consistently, right up through the abduction of Sebastian, was trying to get custody of this child. At this particular time in 2019, he tried to get Nina um, to reconcile and to move to Henderson, Tennessee, where all his family was, and that's what she did reluctantly. Now, Nina moved to Tennessee. She had 2 previous children, Noah and Isabella, and then the baby with Chris, Faith. She ended up moving to Tennessee. There was a particular instance. She said her older daughter got sick. His sister Melissa, Chris's sister Melissa, took Noah for the day, and Faith went to Kathy. Um, Isabella was in the hospital. Melissa came and dropped off Noah, and instead of Kathy returning Faith to her, instead a lawyer came and gave her papers, temporary protective order and divorce papers. This really took Nina by surprise, and then she felt like the whole move to Henderson was a real setup. The lawyer who served these papers is Kathy's family friend named Patty Garner. In January of 2024, they were still, Chris was vying for the custody of Faith, trying to get Sebastian to go live with Seth. Some more information came out concerning that. It's so sad. It turns out while in the care of Chris and Kathy, Sebastian was abused by another child, S.A. Now, in digging up all the research, it looks like while being married to Nina, both Kathy was in the Navy, or I'm sorry, Katie was in the Navy, and Chris were in the Navy, both in San Diego, both stationed at the same base. When Nina, let's just say, I try to tell the story as it unfolds. He was married. Um, and basically, what looks like he had a possible affair with Katie at this time while being married to Nina. Nina had found a text. Um, there's a story Chris told about holding his baby, having her snuggled up to him. She read a text. He was supposed to be leaving to go back, and it said, what time to get in? I can't wait to see you, baby. Something along those lines. And they got into altercation where, she accused him of having an affair. He denied it. She slapped him. And, it just ugly situation. On March 7th, 3 times in an interview, Chris was asked, did he take a lie detector test? He said he did. In fact, he said all the parents involved took lie detector tests. With Duchess on March 17th, Chris said he and Katie both passed polygraphs. She asked him a multiple of times, at least 3 times. Twice he said yes. The last time, the answer was drawn out. Chris brought up foul play. He was defensive and had nebulous answers. He seemed just to not really answer the question. He just referred to the TBI press release that said he and Katie were being cooperative. Hey, peace and love to you, slay the wicked. I am well. Love you too. I love all you guys that are joining me. I love you so much. Now, on March 17th, the TBI basically words were twisted. Okay, on the Nancy Grace interview on the 25th, the polygraph question was asked again. Greetings from West Western North Carolina. I especially love you guys, and I'm praying for y'all out there so much. And I'm in South Carolina, so I'm your neighbor. Now, the polygraph question came up, and Katie said uh, that she did have a polygraph. Chris then said he has not. It turns out none of them had a polygraph at this particular time, as far as I know. Uh, so at this point, on the 25th, Nancy Grace offered to set up a polygraph anytime, any place, and he actually agreed to it. She set it up, went to a lot of trouble to find a polygraph near him, and he never showed up. On April 4th, Nancy asked about this, and Proudfoot claims the TBI instructed him not to show up. I don't believe that was true. Did y'all hear about that? I don't think that the TBI instructed him that. I haven't seen anything in writing, nor did I see it on the press release at all. If you've all seen it or know about that, it was actually uh, a command from TBI for him not to show up. I'd like to see that too. On the 17th, Duchess did an interview and uh, noted he had not retained. He noted he had not retained an attorney, but the Patty Garner, the family friend, was his attorney, according to Nina. Um, this was actually confirmed with Dave Mack. So Nancy confirmed with several different outlets this information and turned to Seth to ask about Chris. So now she's interviewing Seth. She asked about Chris. Um, the polygraph was set up. Chris blamed TBI for not showing up. Okay, so March 18th and 21st, Chris and Katie went to Memphis so Chris could work. This is in the middle of the investigation. This is in the middle of the search, and a lot of people questioned was he even employed on March 25th, because it became a question. Thank you, Slay the Wicked. We are exposing darkness in every corner, in every society, everything I can find, in every possible way. And God's just led me to do some work and research on certain cases, and that's what I'm doing. So Seth, being that it's been 8 months since anyone has seen or heard of this young man, deserves a voice since he can't be his own voice right now. Now, Seth said to TBI at this point, now he said he was never instructed against taking a polygraph, and Chris Proudfoot had actually deliberately lied, it seems, about that. Now, two different accounts say that all three parents had taken a polygraph, but they didn't. Okay. So there's a lot of confusion here about polygraphs, and I'm not sure if any of them ever took polygraphs. Have you all heard about polygraphs? Let me know. Not that they're, surefire admitting that a lot of people can control polygraphs depending on how good of a liar they are too. So that's one reason it's not always admissible. But it's a measure that you would take. If I was being even involved in some type of crime, especially something involving my own child, I would do absolutely everything I could to clear my name if suspicion was on it. And that would include taking a polygraph. I wouldn't have a problem. Like, why would I? Now, some other interesting information and bad information came up. Now, on Nancy Grace, Chris admitted actually to hitting Sebastian with a belt. He said that, and there were a couple different stories concerning this. He admitted to hitting his autistic stepson with a belt, and that Sebastian didn't know why he was being punished. The next day, he went to school and complained about this. Of course, being a report state, they called in CPS, who investigated. According to Chris, they came and he let it slip in one interview and said it was the same lady that came before. So we know that CPS has been out to talk to Chris twice. He said that she basically pulled Sebastian outside when Chris said, "You were just being punished. That's all. You just were being punished." And he said, this is Chris allegedly said that the CPS lady said to Sebastian, "Oh, basically, when you're being punished, you just need to accept your punishment and not come to school and tell lies on people and get them in trouble." Does anyone believe that story? Right, right. People's conscience are seared with a hot iron. Oh, no doubt. So Chris had admitted to hitting his stepson with a belt and being investigated by CPS. Okay. Now, on March 25th, Katie answered that, yeah, CPS had been called, but it was a long time ago. Chris said he gave him one swat for lying, and it was only one swat, and it happened 3 years ago. 3 years ago, the CPS complaint was made that Chris lied. In fact, that Sebastian was 15 years old when it happened, so it really happened just recently. There's a lot of research that's been done on corporal punishment and autism, and none of it is positive. And especially when you think of a child that age, you know, there comes a point that corporal punishment isn't going to do any good. A little spank or a little swat for a little toddler might distract them. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm talking about a swat on a fluffy diaper, might get their attention. But they're certainly past the point of toddle age, it's, in my opinion, not effective, especially on a teenager. You know, there's nothing that shows corporal punishment is good for autism. I guarantee that. There's an understanding and difference. It makes me so mad. Seth, Seth added, uh, basically, in December of 2023, Seth turned 15. Okay, so it was somewhere between then and the end of January that he was actually hit with the belt. Now, that's according to Seth. So it doesn't really matter other than the fact that Chris and Katie were trying to distance themselves from a reported incident. So apparently, according to what seems to be the real story, is Chris saw Sebastian without a belt, grabbed his belt, and hit him with it. So he got in trouble for not wearing a belt. Sebastian complained at school, mandatory reporting. Chris admitted that Seth did get get CPS called on him, or Chris admitted Seth was 15, and this was the second CPS call that came out. So during his story, Chris definitely tried to minimize and distance himself from the incidents. In fact, Chris said it was actually three stories rolled into one, and tried to divert attention off of himself and back onto Seth in a negative way. Now, during this time, Chris, as I said, he was still fighting for custody of his child. Even with these abuse allegations, you'd wonder if the if New Mexico had discovered his background, and why would they even consider him as the sole custodial parent for his daughter? Yeah, and the fact that Chris said that CPS reprimanded Sebastian in this case is a real twist. That bothers me a lot. Now, the final lie. Dogs hit on the scent of Sebastian outside the house, is what Chris said. Chris was trying to say that the dogs hit on the scent of Sebastian outside the house, but apparently, or inside the house, but apparently the dogs only hit on the scent of Sebastian outside the house, where they followed the footprints to the pond. That, as far as I know, is the only hit that any dogs got on Sebastian. So there was just a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation that opened up on this case. Now in 2016, Katie got a restraining order on Seth during their divorce. Katie filed for divorce, and got a temporary restraining order on Seth, claiming allegations also of abuse. When I said there was abuse allegations flying around on both sides, um, there's even more. There's even more, because Chris and Nina had their divorce going through at this time, their custody battle, and yes, their own temporary restraining orders that went back and forth. Now, Chris and Katie left home in the middle of the search. They believe that Sebastian left of his own will. They, at this time, seemed distraught. Chris had lied about the polygraphs. He lied about beating his son, and possibly about his job as well. And suspicions began to surround Chris Proudfoot. When asked about the allegations of abuse, this is where the famous quote came out of Chris's mouth, saying, "There's three sides to the truth." Seth hurt his mom and his, and said that the truth is somewhere in between. Now, this particular abuse allegation came from Seth's mom, where apparently during the investigation they had some kind of words were said. I don't know if there's a witness to this, but there was certainly a complaint that he claimed that he has texts to back up his story, and this and that. Evidence analysis, court records, interviews, police report, facts versus opinion. but opinions are based on the facts I'm finding. These are my opinions. These are not allegations or accusations or just statements of information that I've gotten from police reports, interviews, and press releases during this time. If y'all know any information, please leave that in the comment box. And please remember to like and subscribe, share. We want to get the awareness for Sebastian out because he's been gone for 8 months and nobody knows where he is and nobody knows what's happened. He is on the autistic spectrum and he's a kid that deserves a life and he deserves to be found. And this case doesn't need to be swept under the carpet. So, intriguing theories fly around motives. Okay, so what could possibly be the motives here? Well, one thing we know is that Chris was attempting to gain primary custody of Faith during this time. Chris' history of lying doesn't speak much of him in a lot of respects. His ex-wife has given testimony of abuse not just towards Sebastian, but towards her own children. The chronological order of events doesn't add up. And when Chris talks about meeting Katie, it looks like they possibly both were married and involved since they both were in the Navy, stationed in the same base at San Diego at this particular time. I mean, this is years ago. But nevertheless, there's been inconsistencies all around on pretty much all the stories, all the history, and allegations. So, we're just trying to sort through some of it. Nina paints a dark picture of the entire Proudfoot family. Chris admits to hitting his stepson, domestic violence in New Mexico with Nina and Chris, where temporary protection orders were involved, as well as divorce. He moved Nina to Hendersonville. Nina received or saw a text on his phone, made an accusation to Chris of having an affair while he was holding his infant child Faith, Nina's daughter, with Chris. Nina slapped him across the face. He took Nina, filed a protective order against Nina. Nina flew to New Mexico to be with her family. She filed. I guess she had to go to court over that. The judge did give her custody of Faith. She took the child and flew to New Mexico, where she then did the same thing and filed a protective order against him. Chris said this has zero bearing on Sebastian's case and basically tried to not dwell on his past history. Nina did interview, and Nina said that they had met on a dating app. She had 2 children and was 34 years old, and he was stationed in San Diego and was thrice married. He said he was strict on her babies once they got together. He did spank Noah unnecessarily and harsh. Nina, when she found she was pregnant with Faith, he was upset and wanted her to abort. Instead, she moved in with her mom. A neighbor called her and said he was out there giving her stuff away. Chris stayed away until after the baby was born. It said once the baby was born, he did go to the hospital, and in at least two instances, it said and alleged that he abused the nursing staff verbally. Um, Now, his mother, Chris's mom, flew out to visit the baby, and uh, at this time they were living in housing on base. Nina claims there was abusiveness towards Faith. Um, he returned to San Diego, but asked Nina to move to Hendersonville. Why she did, I don't know, because then she was completely isolated. She felt that this was a plan that was formulated by the whole family when the mom and um, I guess her brother and uncle flew to New Mexico um, to see the baby. On January 2nd, Faith was born. A week later, Kathy took the baby to Tennessee. This was when Nina was moving up to Hendersonville to be with Chris's family while they were married with the young babies. She moved herself and the two kids, but the kids, she said, were an issue. Chris stopped paying for expenses. Somehow she had to get a job. I'm not sure what she was doing in Hendersonville. It was probably being a server, something low paying. I can't imagine that she had that great of a job up there. But anyway, he stopped paying expenses and made her very dependent and spending her money. In the meantime, he was taking care of his own self, and when he came back, he, according to Nina, actually their relationship deteriorated, and he actually backhanded 7-year-old Isabella. So we see there's a history of abusive behavior. Why would you backhand a child? In the end of August 2017, uh, they moved to their own apartment out of base housing. Chris, going back to San Diego, Isabel had to go to the hospital. This is when this story happened. This is Nina's story. Noah stayed with Melissa, Chris's sister. Faith stayed with Kathy, Chris's mother. Patty Gardner issued the temporary order of protection. Patty Gardner is the lawyer that was representing Chris during the divorce and is a personal friend of Kathy. Okay, so I guess apparently Nina then was represented by an attorney named Michael Edwards, who won the case, and even at the exchange where Chris was ordered to return the baby to Nina, there was trouble. She said the trouble came from the entire Proudfoot family. Um, they were supposed to exchange a child in the airport so she could fly back to New Mexico. Kathy got out live streaming the exchange and apparently threw a sack of diapers, and you'll need that, at her. And during the exchange, Chris actually jumped into her truck. His sister was yelling at him, "Why don't you back up over her?" Talking about Nina. Nina trying to get her children out of the truck that Chris was in. It sounds like a big mess. It sounds like a big mess. Okay, so Um, Nina was handed papers and immediately searched. She snatched Faith from Katie in the airport. The police didn't help, saying that Chris had the right to have the children. The papers turned out to be a summons for a hearing that she had already known about. She felt like it was set up, used to make her look crazy on camera since it was being live streamed. And what it was an order for a psychiatric evaluation. Okay, so there was a lot of chaos and confusion in the whole family. It sounds like, and so to connect the dots, we got Faith moving in. This is okay. So that's what Chris wants. Chris wants Faith to move in with him, but he wants Seth. He wants Sebastian to move out. Seth claims Chris did not want Sebastian around Faith. This is tied to an incident 2 years prior under the Proudfoot watch. Sebastian was 8 years old and left in the care of a 13-year-old. This is in San Diego and was SA'd. Seth says he did not get the proper help and was scared that in time he might repeat this behavior. Seth was scared of him becoming a predator and felt that Chris looked at Sebastian like a predator instead of like a 15-year-old child with autism. Sebastian was doing things, I guess, sometimes that seemed inappropriate, but remembering that he's on the spectrum, it's really not unusual. I don't want to talk about those things on this slide because, you know, Seth is missing. And Seth can't say anything for his own self, for his own defense. And I'm not an expert on autism. I don't know what's, normal or what's not normal. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit something. Okay, sorry about that. Um, so I don't want to go into all that, but anyway, there's already some contention between Chris and his stepson Sebastian. Um, Katie had her chance to speak about the incidents. She uh, came up with a lot of different contradictions on the story of the alleged essay, and she said the boy was not 13. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what difference it makes. It does in a sense, but then at the same time, the incident happened. It affected them. All three of the parents knew what was going on. Apparently, he didn't get the right kind of help that he needed. But Seth then became involved in the therapy, trying to make sure that he does get the right help, from what I'm understanding. Um, Now, this is Katie's story. She said that, while she was trying to get him help at the same time, Seth was banned from the base. Um, and said basically that Seth was displaying abusive behavior, allegedly. Um, Seth and Katie's story goes from 2008, where they met and married. They then had Sebastian. In 2016, they divorced. Um, accused Seth of abusing Sebastian, beating him, and the neighbor even said or according to Katie, a neighbor even saw Sebastian outside crying and looking for his dad. I believe at this point, Seth had, was taken care of Sebastian, but was displaying a lot of inappropriate behavior, staying out all night, and this type of thing. I don't know. This is what I'm getting from Katie's story. Emotional abuse was brought up, according to Katie. Seth said to Sebastian, "Mom doesn't love Dad. That's why she's, putting us through all this." Um, I guess there were complaints that teachers were uncomfortable with Seth. Apparently, he doesn't have good people skills or doesn't talk to people in authority that well, and they get intimidated by his behavior. The CPS, according to Katie, was terrified of the father. I don't know if this is true. Again, that sounds like, maybe not. Katie hired a therapist, so that Seth would not cut off communication. According to Katie, he's highly aggressive, cursing and yelling. He would be angry at Sebastian and, you know, uh, had violent behavior. These are all allegations. On 8/16/16, the day before the order, Sebastian said he hated his father, according to Katie. Seth said he was mad at him, but not violent. On 8/22, there's an incident where Seth was belligerent, according to these documents. Case of DV and child abuse uh, were included in Katie's custody documents, and Seth responded by saying it was just to keep him away. Katie uh, okay, so apparently in September of 2023, they were relocated. I'm not sure what all happened after that. So anyway, it looks like there's just a lot of confusion in the case. There's a lot of accusations. There's abuse flying on all behalves. And it brings us to today. Where is Sebastian? What happened to Sebastian? Where did he go? Did he go with someone? Did he go of his own will? Did he meet somebody online? Did he meet somebody, who were those two people with flashlights in the woods? Did Chris Proudfoot have a job in Memphis at that time? Is that real? He really was. I've heard some stories about poker games and this and that. I haven't looked into yet. I would like any information if you have it. Otherwise, I'll be reporting back with what I find. Thanks for joining me to talk about these two important cases to bring awareness, as we want nothing but justice for Mica and justice for Sebastian. I'll talk to you guys about some other cases of mysterious natures that are falling behind in the eyes of the public, and we're going to keep awareness alive till justice is served. I thank y'all for joining me. I love you guys a lot. Please like, subscribe, share, and be a part of the cool clubs that I'm setting up online, where we're going to have private talks and some very intriguing videos presented to the clubs exclusively. I love you guys. Thanks so much. Enjoy your day.